All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April 2022 Argo CDN Rollouts Community Meeting. I'm your host for today, Jesse Soon, and I'm a maintainer of the Argo project. So today we have a couple items on the agenda. We have some issues that the community has brought up, as well as we'll be going over actually three recent proposals. I think two of them are already accepted. I'm not sure about the third one. But these will be upcoming features on the Argo CD roadmap, and it's your chance to kind of help shape that before they come into realization. Um, just a reminder that these Argo adheres to the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be courteous and respectful during this meeting. And this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube after. Um, Finally, if you do have any other agenda items or issues or discussion topics, feel free to add them to the or suggestion on the Google Doc, and we'll see if we can get to them this go around. Okay, so let's see. First, we had. Uh, okay, so someone put on community developer contributor documentation. Um, is that person online?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to meet everybody. I had put that. I've been recently trying to collaborate a little bit. I think I did some documentation a few months ago, and I wanted to bump Helm version to the latest. I had a PR up, but I had quite a difficult time setting up on my Mac M1. So I'd love to, as I've been kind of troubleshooting and doing a little bit of that, I'd love that somebody could help, not so much mentor me, but I've seen some of the tooling that's missing in the documentation, and I'd love to maybe update that documentation. And maybe some of the tooling I've picked up from Alex MT has a GIST in some space in his personal repo, and I got some documentation from there of some tooling, like the I think gRPC or the proc
Mhm.
tool. And I got other stuff from the official Argo project repo, and then some other tool didn't work, and I just kind of like went working through it. So I think as part of maybe developer onboarding, somebody who's trying to help, like myself,
Yeah.
I'm already running through some of these pains. I still have some of them as I'm failing some integration tests that I'll figure it out eventually. But I'd love to maybe put this somewhere and maybe get a little help of where should I put this so somebody else like myself doesn't encounter it again. I think the documentation is great and there's a lot of things there, but some other things aren't there, like some flags that I kind of slacked in. Hey, what do I do in this scenario? And somebody, hey, put this flag. So I'd love to update that documentation so it's just easier for anybody else to come in and do that. But I'd love to pair with somebody to kind of like, who can I bounce the ball?
Yeah. I let me uh, do some historical stuff. So, originally, like toolchain was very like environment dependent, I would say. In other words, you have to say brew install this, brew install that, and that was actually highly dependent on the time point when you executed that command. Um, so that didn't obviously wasn't very portable. And then we went to this containerized model where kind of everything happened into inside the Docker container. And that was portable, but it was really, really slow to build. And I mean, that option is still, I believe, what's documented right now, and probably the thing that we tell everyone. But in my view, the future state is that we go back to localized build, but with predictable or consistently reproducible tool chain. And I did make some strides on that by making things like Proto C and um, uh, I think the majority, all the Golang based tools are now compiled under the dist directory of Argo CD. So the ideal state is that someone clones Argo CD. I think they run make install local toolchain or something like that. And then at that point, they have everything they need. Um, and the dist path gets added to the path so that it prefers that when running all the EDE tests or all the code gen and stuff. I don't think so. We're not there yet, and that this also doesn't cover the UI stuff as well. Um, so on this topic, I think the right thing we should be doing is kind of making more steps towards portable local tool chains. Um, and I can I think I can like help out on that side, like maybe point you in the right direction on how that could be. We can start going that direction. Any other thoughts on this from maintainers?
Yeah, and I we have a place in the documentation where you can document developer experience. Yeah, and then I just posted that link in chat. I guess maybe that's the place where we can collaborate. It
Yeah,
think
that's
that
where I was,
yeah.
that's where I was thinking of maybe adding some stuff in there. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm basically I think I just want to second JC is that right now this documentation it has only Docker based steps, but looks like we want to. It works for everyone who's on Linux because Docker is much quicker on Linux, but Mac users just don't use it because it's too slow, or some people use it, but it's just not the best experience. So maybe we can just have two tracks. Like we can have there is a running locally document, and it has Docker based, and I just maybe you can send your basically send a pull request that documents your experience of how you run it locally. Yeah. And
sure, yeah, great. I mean, there's a few things in there. Even the Docker experience I'm having issues with. But I'll ping you and I'll ping a couple of other folks who've kindly messaged back at me, and I will do a PR against that documentation base. Maybe that can help.
I also, are you in the contributors Slack?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
Yeah, that's the right audience for these are basically other Argo developers than kind of more developer focused discussions.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you, Miguel. Sorry. Um, okay, I think next there's it looks like there's two issues. I think from Ray. Ray, are you Raymond? Is,
I, I am here.
hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you raised two issues, I guess, that are maybe getting ignored. So you want to talk about them?
Yeah, sure. The first one is basically adding secrets for clusters that you can use the exec plugin. You actually responded to me like a while back, and it was like an issue with the kubeless. And then on the last comment, someone was posting another thread for GKE Authentication, and there's workarounds on there. And then the last thing in that thread was a new authentication proposal from Alexander.
Oh yeah.
So I was kind of wondering what the best way to handle this is right now. Because right now I'm doing like a hack where I have like a post sync that will do just like an Argo CD cluster add, which is not really ideal. I would like to use the declarative secrets and work that into app sets for clusters. So I was just wondering, like, should I try one of these workarounds or wait for this new authentication to come in?
So your ultimate goal is you want Google IAM auth to manage GKE clusters. That's like the ultimate goal.
I, the goal is to have the secret for the cluster using like some sort of provider like the gcloud command that I was trying to do in that example, or any sort of like authentication mechanism.
Oh, okay. So wouldn't you prefer to use Google IAM to authenticate an remote GKE cluster to the Argo CD control plane. Rather, I think you're trying to get the secret in a secure manner, and then just use basic auth to connect to that cluster. Is that
Basically, I try to do like the G Cloud command. Like, you know how when you have GKE, you click connect, and then that gives you the G Cloud command to validate, and then it will just generate the configs and all that.
I see.
So kind of a programmatic way of handling this, but maintaining it in the secret,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a hacky post sync job.
Is it possible to use Google workload identities?
Yeah, that's just what I was gonna ask.
Yeah. So
Maybe.
I thought maybe Google workload identities might. I ultimately we don't have good support for GKE. I know that's why this other issue exists in the first place. But my understanding was that and maybe I could be wrong on this, but I believe that the ultimate landing point was that Argo CD control plane would run with a workload identity on GKE, which somehow using Google commands would be able to passwordless authenticate to remote GKE clusters.
I could try that, but how does that interact with the secret? Like, do I need to put it on which deployment?
Just works. Basically, there's a little bit of Google magic that you tie a service account, a Kubernetes service account to your pod, and that pod then authenticates to Google. And so the G Cloud CLI will just have the credentials. You won't have to store a secret anymore.
Yeah, the basic auth flow of the G Cloud command will check if that identity is there, and it'll use it.
Right, I could do the workload identity, but how do I put that into the secret so that Argo CD has the clusters, like all the IPs and certificates?
Yep. Maybe we can take it offline, but the first thought was that I know that in Argo CD you can register a cluster and don't specify any keys there, and then Argo CD will try to use just the pod credentials to talk to the cluster, and then
yeah, I'm using the Argo CD CLI in my post sync job, but I feel like that's a little hacky.
I think I forget what the blocker was for this issue, Alex.
The blocker is I failed to. I think I just stuck, and maybe now I really want to sync up with Zach, because he probably knows some details. Yeah, and then I just could not do it. I kind of time boxed the problem and then spent a few hours and then gave up. But now I want to try again.
Yeah.
And it looks like what I really need, I just need to replicate this snippet in Golang.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Yeah. And then it will finally unblock the pull request. And
okay.
Yeah.
But Ray, I think the ultimate thing is you shouldn't. I don't think you should be dealing with secrets at all, because if the right trust relationships are set up, the pod itself, Google will recognize this pod as someone who can.
Yeah, and I think this I can help
right.
this. I can help to I can send you. Basically, you can have a declarative secret definition, and I can help you to get this declarative definition kind of offline. I will basically send you a snippet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can respond also on the GitHub issue. That way
On that,
others...
let me please copy the link.
Yeah, it's in the.
Oh, it's in the doc. Okay.
Notes.
All right. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, okay. And then the second issue was something that popped up in 2.3.0. And then basically, if you change to list or summary view, everything would revert back to the original view. So Terry fixed that. And then I noticed in 2.3.1, when I tried to delete an application, it would again revert back to the view that you have there. So that works for deleting an app with non-cascading, and then also if you don't choose non-cascading.
Okay, so this is just a UI.
Yeah.
Okay.
But thanks for bringing this up. I just marked it as a regression. Regression label helps to kind of bubble it up, and yeah, we should fix it. Thanks for.
Oops.
Yeah. Maybe Terry's familiar with that since he fixed the first issue.
I just did it.
Okay.
Label.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, the regressions have higher priority items, so if things of regression are usually fixed in patch releases. Okay. Thanks, Raymond. All right, let's get to the proposal. So we have at least 2 of them that are accepted. The first one is multiple application sources, which has kind of been a long-standing request in CD. Ishita, do you want to take over and present this? Ishita? Are you online? If not, we can come back and do the config management plugin parameterization first.
Since she's having some mic issues, we can present the
okay
first.
Sure. All right. So second proposal was how we will be able to have flexible parameterization of config management plugins. And is that you, Leo?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I work with Michael. If I don't know how to answer something, Michael could please jump in. Yeah, we work together. Also, Alex worked a lot on this one. So let me share my screen. Okay. So if you're not familiar, CMP stands for Configuration Management Plugin. And the idea is just providing a little bit of a background. The idea is to be able to do something like what Argo CD does with customize and Helm charts, but outside of Argo CD code base. So is the plugin to allow Argo CD to generate manifests for different sort of manifest generators, if you will. So the most famous ones today are Customize and Helm charts. So by the time we conclude this CMP v2, because there was a CMP v1 back in the days, but it was a little bit limited. So we created v2. And the missing piece in v2 is because it didn't allow the plugin to interact with the UI to provide parameters. So today, for example, if you want to sync a specific application, so I have just a very simplistic application here deployed locally. And if you want to provide parameters values from the Argo CD UI while syncing, if this is going through a CMP provider, we lost this ability. So the main reason of why we work in this proposal is to bring back this parameterization functionality to the CMP landscape. So CMP developers could leverage this, and UI would dynamically create some panel here with what the plugin developer defines, right? So I'm not thinking about going in a lot of details in the proposal. Maybe just on the two main aspects of it. So when you're defining a CMP, the idea is that you'll be defining most of the times two files inside your CMP. One is the config management plugin manifest, which is not a real CRD, by the way. This is mainly a file that will be shipped together with your CMP. And the idea is define here how the UI will be displaying the possible parameters your plugin accepts for generating manifests. So if we scroll down a little bit, there's a place where we can find the parameter announcement struct. So here you can find things like the title, the tooltip, if it's required or not, the item type, and the collection type. So if this parameter is a simple string, or there are some cases where we're gonna be accepting a map or an array. So this is one of the pieces that we kind of discussed quite a lot, and we came up with this format. But again, I don't think this is a set in stone. I believe that by the time we start developing, if we find issues, we can evolve this. But at least the proposal provides a north, right? So that's the idea. So that are the possibilities that developers will be able to use while defining the CMP configurations. And the other file is a bash script that the CMP will be invoking for generating the manifests themselves. And the bash script will be provided an environment variable that will be having all the values that were passed by the UI back to the CMP container with the actual values the user wants to generate manifests with. So that's the big picture of this new feature. And again, I'm not. It's a big proposal. We discussed quite a few questions, and we challenged different ideas. So that's the current state. It's approved. It's merged in Argo CD, and right now we are in stage of planning the start of the work and actually planning who's going to be implementing what. So that's about it. If you have any questions, please let us know.
I have a question.
Yep.
Was it considered at all to use so right now parameters looks like like a flat list of key to value, where value can be flexible in its type, like it can be a map or list or string or something. Is that correct?
Yes, okay. That's correct.
Did you consider at all using like open API? So is it possible to have more deeper nested structures, like for example Helm? It's not just a flat list of key to value, like we have value files, values, and so that the structure of the Helm config management is quite complicated, which wouldn't be possible to do in this flat parameter list. My question is, was OpenAPI considered at all in lieu of, I guess, a parameter list, or as a subfield of parameter?
I remember you mentioning about OpenAPI. I think we started discussing about it, but wouldn't this approach here address the Helm chart cases when we have a more in-depth struct provided. So users could define the keys using this notation here. And this could be passed to the Helm chart for evaluation.
I think when Helm, so I think that the problem I'm thinking of is that if you have well-defined structure that are nested under the parameter, so maybe you had, I think values, values is a bad example right now, but okay, actually, let's say customize as an example. So what does customize look like in this CMP v2? Is it possible to capture all of our customized parameters, like the image, name prefix? Those are actually easy too. What I'm thinking of is if you have a more complex structure of nested structs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to come up with an example right now.
Yeah, our idea on that is that we could leverage the map key to provide the complex struct that you would have in that plugin, and that could be passed to the underlying binary to generate to provide that parameter value. That was our idea. To be,
I can
go
maybe
ahead.
add a little bit of at least my perspective why we didn't think about Open API in the first place. At least I was thinking mostly about plugin developer experience. So that this design is kind of as friendly as we could get from the developer perspective. So whoever is writing plugin most likely is going to use Bash, and it felt like it would be easy to, use this structure. Yeah, and that was just one reason why we didn't even consider it.
We made a point to make sure we thought that this structure would solve all the use cases that Helm and Customize currently present. Even if it is a little bit hacky, I think that it'll be able to present an on-par experience. But yeah, if we get to a point where folks really want to have rich parameter structures, then we could definitely consider like JSON schema, Open API. This was just the minimal to get what we figured would support our current use cases.
Do you think, I think there are like two questions, custom schema versus Open API and ability to have nested parameters in general. Would it help, JC, if we just keep the room in the spec to possibly add nested parameters?
Yeah, and I was about to say that. So I think the parameterization is an easy way to just get to key value things, and I think that will probably satisfy most plugins. And I do agree that that's a great starting point. I've been messing with crossplane recently a lot, and crossplane has to be very freeform in how you define the schemas, and so they expect you to have very complex structured objects, but you have to, the consequences that I have to come up with an Open API spec to define those so that the specs get validated and rejects like invalid schemas. But I think it might be overkill for this. As long as we leave room, I think, for that possibility in the future, then I think we're fine.
Okay, I think we can do it. I think there is, it could be just, additional field items under parameters or something like that.
Yeah, or something in lieu of like someone chooses a parameter-based approach or like a Open API, a JSON schema-based approach, and then they can choose which one they want their plugin to look like.
think we'll actually need to add an additional field besides string array and map if we want full Helm support, because someone has added raw YAML support to the Helm values field.
Yeah, that's the one that I want. I think that was the idea that I was trying to allude to earlier. Yeah.
I think we could solve that just by adding a raw field. And then if we wanted the validator to get some spec, the announcement could include, you know, something that holds a JSON schema or whatever, and then the UI can validate it or even generate UI based on it. So there's room in the structs to add like validation information or accept additional fields. But I think this covers current features and leaves room for those future features.
Okay. Yeah, I think the raw would also help if we had additional type. Yeah. Thank you, Leo, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see if Ashita is back. Let's see.
If not, we worked with Ashita on the proposal, so I can try to do my best to, to talk about it.
Yeah. Ashita, I noticed you're still muted, so I'm not sure if you're trying to mess with the microphone versus the Zoom.
I just saw a message that same issue with the Zoom and microphone. So
Okay.
if you don't mind, I can just try to present it.
Okay, yeah, Alex is familiar with the proposal, so you can.
Okay, I will share my screen, but please bear with me. I was not preparing. You know, I don't have a speech and a presentation. Okay, can you please confirm you can see my screen and the?
We see an empty desktop.
Okay, let me share another screen then. How about now? Can you see the document?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So I will start from, I want to start from use cases. And basically, we identified two main inconveniences that our user are facing. So one of them is related to Helm chart. That's the best example of the use case. So basically, users have a Helm-based application, and typically it's the off-the-shelf Helm chart in the repository that users don't have control over. And at the same time, users want to use various files that is also committed in Git in some other repository. And so the use case is that we want to get files from two repositories and then generate manifests from only one repo. And during manifest generation, we want to reference value files committed in another repo. So that's first use case. And second, sometimes Argo CD users just want to create application that consists of two charts. And maybe the typical example is like two Helm charts. One includes CRD definitions, and second uses the CRDs. And it just sometimes makes sense to combine those two into one application. And right now it's impossible because Argo CD application allow users to specify only one Git repository. And so we want to propose a change and improve it. So both use cases would be solved natively. And so the proposal is to introduce new field called sources. And this is right now on the screen. Let me just make my screen a little bigger. So that the sources is the only difference between source and sources is that sources is an array, and the structure of each item in that array is same as structure of a source. So it would have a repo URL, target revision, and then some config management tool specific parameters. And then we want to eventually deprecate the source field. And the initially behavior would be that you can set only one of those. Actually, you can set both fields, but if you set sources, Argo CD would just ignore the source and maybe print a warning in logs. And this change is already enough to cover the second use case that I mentioned, where you just want to have an application that consists of 2 Helm charts, for example. And so to satisfy that use case, you would just need to mention those both Helm charts in the sources. So you would have to create second item in that list, and that's it. The use case is solved. And the other use case about referencing files is a little bit more complex because of 2 things. First of all, in this use case, the second repository that has files should not produce any manifests. And somehow you need to tell to Argo CD that the second source is just source of files. It's not really source of real manifests. And to make it possible, we want to make a second change. We want to make path or chart fields optional. And if you don't know, basically right now, path and chart field points to either a folder within Git repository or Helm chart within Helm charts repository. And it kind of tells Argo CD that this chart or this path should be used to run config management tool, and it should produce manifests. And so we decided that if we make it possible to not specify any of those fields, then it's clear enough that Argo CD just need to get the repo, but don't really generate any manifests. And so that's the first change. And then second change, it is not clear how would Argo CD know that, how would you express in your spec that you want to get files from another repo? And to make that possible, we want to introduce a new field on the source called ref. And actually it's a subject to change. I think we want to make it name instead of ref, but I would use ref because this is what we have in documentation right now. But ref is basically a name of that source. And you can basically use environment variable substitution in your second source definition to reference files from the first source. And let me start from beginning. So basically, I want to render Elasticsearch Helm chart, and I want to get values files, which is in my personal repository. And so in this case, I would have to define 2 sources. The first source points to my personal repository. It does not have any path or chart specified. And so Argo CD won't try to render any manifests from the repo. And then in order to reference files from the repo, I gave a name to my source or reference. I named it my repo. And then in my second source definition, I have a pointer to the Helm chart repository. It has a path, so Argo CD knows it needs to generate manifests from here. And inside of the value files, I use the reference name to resolve the location of this first repository. And so that Argo CD knows that it needs to, Argo CD will replace this environment, this reference with the real path. And then value files, this second portion is just a relative path within my repository that points to values.yaml file. And that's it. That's the proposal. Maybe please ask questions if you have any. And if not, I can explain what other options we considered when we decided to use environment variables.
So how is this going to interact, I guess, with the CMP, the CP20?
Yes, we thought about it, and that was one of the reasons why we decided to use this environment variable. Basically, it's kind of, this is the most questionable part of this proposal, we kind of have to introduce this magical syntaxes. And the other option that we considered was to make a, let's say for the Helm, we could have first class support for sources. So we were really thinking to duplicate value files, a field, and then transform it into some strongly typed array, and that each item would have source. And so it would be, less magical, and kind of the validation would work in the CRD, but it would not work with config management plugins, because each and every plugin would have to have support for sources. And so that's why we realized that it's not the best decision. But this environment variables kind of help us to support sources in config management plugins transparently. And the one idea, it's not like 100% defined how we will going to do it exactly, but one idea is that we can simply change the contract. So right now, config management plugins receive a tarball and they untar it into some random location. And so one idea I had this, that Argo CD can specify the location in the config management plugin file system where the tarball should be untarred. And if this is the case, Argo CD is going to know how the value of this myrepo environment variable. Basically, Argo CD is going to know how this variable should be resolved to, to which path it should be resolved to. And so Argo CD can perform that substitution. And so for config management plugin, it would look like it doesn't even know about multiple sources. It would just get a bunch of files with a bunch of folders, and the tar would have several repos instead of one. It would untar it into some predictable location, and then it would get Argo CD, sorry, config management plugin would receive this portion, but with no environment variables in it. It would be resolved already. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, it's like, it kind of requires,
Yeah.
Like we need to think about it. Like another option is to delegate resolution of those environment variables to the plugin itself.
Right.
And it should not be too difficult actually to implement, because it can be a simple convention. Like so either keep that knowledge on Argo CD, but that would require, like Argo CD would have to tell to config management plugin where to extract the files, or we can just have convention so that, and we can tell that plugins must resolve those variables, but rule is simple enough. Maybe there is even third option. We can resolve it to relative passes, and then the convention would be run config management tool. Yeah, okay, yeah, those files can be simply relative. So those passes here could be resolved to relative passes, and they should be resolved to the target folder, to the place where config management tool should be executed. So,
Right. I guess the best option would be one that didn't require any changes in the config management plugin
yeah,
itself, right?
Right.
yeah. But yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the main point is the use of this environment variable seems, at first it at first glance it looks very magical, right? It's not a well structured thing, but I think the driving force behind it was because of config management plugins. We didn't want those things to have to deal with the understanding of multiple sources. It would just have to be told where to find things at precise locations. and I think it's still in the implementation, like how that will be accomplished.
But I think we kind of get to a good level of confidence that it's possible. Like we will not have to redo config management plugins to support it.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Yeah, and there is one more reason. It kind of basically we already do config environment variable substitution. It's possible, like there are a set of environment variables that are available during config management, during manifest generation, and it's already possible to use those environment variables in in the source spec. And because we already do it, it's kind of makes it a little less magical. So it's not like we're inventing a new thing from scratch. Some variables already there, so we're kind of just adding more. Yeah.
So Miguel asked in chat, would it handle escaping the $ for folder maybe named $web example?
I mean, the source code that we already have this environment variable substitution code written, and we support unescaping. So basically, you can have $2 here. Yeah.
Nikita asks, can we read values from a config map? I don't. No, I don't think that's possible.
It's the main problem is that like we want to have immutable config management, like immutable manifests, and that's why the source have to have a revision, and that's like config map doesn't have revision, so it's kind of it can change unpredictably, and we don't know. When it change, you can suddenly get a deployment in production, or like Argo CD caches everything, and it uses this revision as a key. Basically, it resolves it to commit and knows that if the key is the same, it will not try to regenerate manifests. So even if we make it possible to use config map, Argo CD just won't notice that config map changed. It will not try to regenerate manifests.
I think there are a couple cons to variable substitution that we should consider. One being certain tools, there may be intuitive places where you would use multi-sources, but couldn't because you don't have access to the environment variable. For example, if I have a customized repo that just applies a patch to another source's base, I'm not sure how I could reference that other base because you can't use environment variables in a customized file. The other concern is
I think environment variables may be the wrong term. They're actually
those are not environment variables.
okay.
They're variables. They're basically variables that are pre-substituted before any template invocation of the binary. So I guess they're YAML. Think about them as YAML variables that either ideally is handled by the repo server before the plugin even knows about it. That ideally that's where we want to land. But in the worst case, plugins would have to know that, hey, I might need. Here are two sources, and this whenever you see this $ repo, it refers to the path of the other source. That's the worst case. But by the time customized build happens, they won't have customized build won't know about this $ my repo.
Yeah, but actually, I thought about the customize example. Actually, customize won't really help, but like in customize, in general, the problem is you cannot pass parameters. So that's why I don't know how we would resolve it for customize. But if you use something like JSONnet, JSONnet can, can read environment variables, real environment variables. So I was thinking we can have a convention, like we can have, if you all the source names can be also available in real environment variables. And it could be, I don't know, source underscore name underscore path. and the real value of that path.
Oh, you're saying you actually want to make these available
Yes,
as environment variables?
Yes, I would wait for real case because it would not help customize, because in customize you cannot use environment variable to conditionally point to like remote source, but you could do it in JSONnet. I was waiting for, if we get requests like this for example, actually JSONnet is not a good example too, because JSONnet has the similar parameters, ability to specify parameters like Helm. So JSONnet is also covered. But if we get yet another config management tool that.
My other concern is that the path itself as of 2.3 is sensitive. And I'm not sure we're going to have good enough control over where that gets output, for example, into a config map for someone to read. One possibility is that we could copy all the other sources into the same directory as the dependent source.
But it will not make it less. It won't make it more dangerous than it is right now, because every config management plugin can just get the current working directory, and it would know the real location of in this example of this repository, right? So, or maybe I'm not following here, but it feels to me that if you don't trust the tool itself, then it's kind of it's already too late. Okay, I'm not 100% confident in what I'm saying right now. Yeah, I need to think more. And I'm really hoping that it will no longer be sensitive in this upcoming version, because we improving it.
Okay, we have one more. Michael said micro proposal.
Yeah, hopefully short.
Okay.
And if people think it's a real proposal, I'll convert it into a real proposal, but it seems simple enough to be just an issue. The idea is currently, if someone wants to debug a broken application or just kind of know what's happening in an app, they have to dig into the individual resources, look at events for, say, an individual pod, and try to figure out what's up. And even when you do that, you don't really know what that event looks like in relation to other events that have happened in an application. So I've proposed adding this button, or putting a button somewhere. I just put it here that pulls in all the events for the application, keeps it automatically updated, puts them in chronological order. So I can see that there was an error here, and maybe I know what these mean in relation to that. Maybe they were caused by that error. If I want to drill in and see the event specific to a certain resource, just click it, pulls up that resources events tab. There's a lot that's sort of up in the air here, things that could be improved, but the basic idea is we want to make it to where folks can get to the problematic event quickly.
Yeah, I think we had one thing that's been perpetually on our roadmap about like a timeline view it would be like adjacent to the tree view and the pod view and the network view. I was thinking that proposal was actually going a little bit further in that events was just one. I guess actually the timeline view would be essentially the same thing as what you're seeing here, but presented like in a timeline. So imagine that there's this kind of bar going across the page, but with dots kind of sprinkled in when actually because events are spanned, it would be kind of spans of time when the events were happening. And I think as part of that view, you could maybe look at it in a list view or go back to the time view and click on like certain it's like, oh, something has happening like within like the last 2 hours, and they click on that particular span and then see what the exact thing. But yeah, I I like this idea. I actually think we should go further.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. It's almost like a Gantt chart type view, I think is what you're describing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's probably the best picture of it. I don't know if
UI
it's in the, yeah. Go ahead.
UI is a little less like UI is not like a CRD spec, so we can change it. Like no one is going. Where I'm going is like before we have this, mockups for this Gantt chart like view. Is it okay to just have a list view first, and then we can maybe introduce like a switch, like different view types, buttons here, and then introduce second view and kind of build it.
Oh yeah. I guess we can do it in stages. So like this is probably, I mean, this is obviously already working. So I'm sure people really appreciate this coming in earlier, and then in the later release having a more sophisticated view.
And we were discussing to have a kind of a little badge that has number of error events or bad events here, so users will know that something just happened, because that the number will change. So it's like a poor man's way to get notified.
Michael, how do you get all events, but then also filter to the application?
Yeah, right now I'm getting all events, looping over the resource nodes or the event application resource nodes and filtering them. I'm considering maybe a more performant way would be to construct a filter before you even go to the Kubernetes API. Depending on whether the application is massive or the cluster is massive, you might go one direction or the other to improve performance. But yeah.
But don't we? It's not like all events. It's events from the target namespace only, right?
True. Target namespace, target cluster. Yeah.
So at least that's
okay. Yeah. That I think that's the best you can do for namespace. But then as soon as stuff crosses namespaces, then we're gonna somehow have to figure out a performant way of looking at events like in many namespaces.
In answer to chat, filters, yes. Just eventually, maybe not with the initial release.
All right. So it sounds like, well, I was the only one talking, but I don't know if anyone there had any opinions on this. But personally, I really been wanting this for a while. So.
Thanks, so.
All right. So we're at the hour. Thanks everyone for attending this month's community meeting. And as always, we have weekly contributors meeting for Argo CD and rollouts on Thursdays. And then if you're interested in workflows, we have weekly scrums on Tuesday mornings, as well as the monthly workflow community meeting on the third Wednesday of every month. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.